What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Just F It podcast. Today, Angelo and I are welcoming in an incredibly inspiring guest. I can't wait for you guys to hear her amazing story of how she overcame basically every single odds, every single challenge that was thrown her way, and how she is literally thriving in life right now. Welcome to the show, Bianca Castillo.
Thank you, Renata. That's such a great introduction. I'm super humbled and super excited to be here. Thank you so much.
That was clean, wasn't it? I was like, Renata, her intro game is like on point.
I'm going to take pointers. Yeah. Part of my job is to introduce my manager in certain meetings. So, I mean, I should have had a paper handy and take some notes. Renata, so thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Bianca, I want to just say thank you again for taking this time to be on the podcast, to be on the show. We had such an awesome first call that Renata and I met a few times after that, and we're like, yeah, that's not like a one episode type thing. That we got to make that into two things. And for this first episode, we want to give you an opportunity to tell your story because, guys, for everyone that's watching or listening right now, Bianca's story is like a movie. Like it's just a movie that keeps building and building and building. And this is her real life story. And she's in it right now, right? She's obviously on the upswing when things are going amazing. But to hear where she's coming from, like, I was just speechless after our first conversation, like kind of thinking like that is like a movie where life just keeps getting at you and getting at you and getting at you, and you still get up better than what you were before. And
thank you.
I'm excited. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to let you do your thing. But before we start, Renata, how did you and Bianca connect?
Yeah, so we actually connected through Arate, which we're all a part of, but more specifically the women's group. So we have an incredible Facebook group full of women. We meet every Monday to talk about all the things business related, as well as have people discuss, certain topics or just share part of their lives so that we can get to know them better. And Bianca was one of them. We literally listened to her story and every single one of us was moved to tears. Like I was like, I'm not crying, you're crying. When your story is this powerful, it's impossible not to be moved. So I think we should just get to it, huh?
Thank you.
Let's do it. So tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and then let's just go right into the story because that is my favorite piece. I can't wait to get that going.
Sure. So professionally, I am currently right now working on learning how to become a commercial banker. I've been given a great opportunity to help a bank establish their presence on the West Coast. So I'm very excited about that because I'm also learning from the beginning, how to establish that presence. So I'm super excited about that. Previously, I was a branch manager for JP Morgan Chase. So pretty much in management and in leadership, and pretty much also led business resource groups at Chase. And so that's my expertise when it comes to managing a team and leading individuals to enhance their career per se. But now I'm in their shoes and I'm learning something new. So I'm super excited about that. So pretty much my story begins. I grew up in Inglewood, California. And for some of you, if you love gangster rap, that's pretty much what Inglewood is well known for. But now, luckily, the SoFi Stadium is being built there. So that will be our new Ram Stadium. So that's something good that's coming to the community. I grew up there in the 90s when, late 80s, early 90s, when senseless violence was going on. And I think that's where kind of like my story begins. And when Ed says like things happen for you, not to you, I feel that definitely being in that community at the time was something that happened for me. So, you know, unfortunately, I was able to witness, you know, drive-by shooting, you know, gangsters in the area. I share with Renata and the women in the group. I remember wearing blue Jordans, and you know, the Bloods there were like, Bianca, what are you doing wearing red? And I mean, when I tell that story and someone else hears it, they've never even experienced that. So that was somewhat of my life growing up.
So I don't want to cut you off, but just
stop me at any time.
No, I love it. I love it. But let's just I want to slow things down just a second, because I'm familiar with it, right? Obviously, I was a cop. You grew up in that neighborhood, and some people will be like, "What do you mean blue and red?" Can you explain a little bit about that? Because some people who may like, "What do you mean? There's a color?" You know what I mean? Like, there's a different.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up. I mean, you know, I grew up like learning that you couldn't wear a certain color, and even till today, like present moment, even with my son bought like red Adidas like 2 years ago, and I'm like, there's no way that you can wear that. And he's like, Mom, like, stop freaking out. Like, what's wrong with you? And that's just the true reality of when you live in a community, you know, low to moderate income community where it's gang infested. You know, you have to learn like right away what colors you're allowed to wear and what you're not allowed to wear. So where I used to live, I actually lived around the corner from where the Bloods lived. So we weren't allowed to wear blue. But it's so funny because our uniforms were blue and white. So you're just like this is my school uniform, guys. Like, you know. But yeah, you were asked if you were affiliated of some sort with the gang, if you wore a certain color. And till this day, I mean, call it PTSD. You know, just seeing my son, you know, buying that type of shoe and telling him, hey, you can, and he just doesn't understand. You know, and until this day, it still concerns me. Like if he wears too much red, if he wears too much of a color, it's like, please don't. Where you might go on social media and see that it's the fad. But, you know, luckily we don't live in the community right now. So that's part of kind of like, you know, where I've been, you know, thriving to, you know, eventually move out of the community and not be in that environment. But, you know, definitely having to learn what color you're able to wear. It's, you know, for me, it was just normal. But talking to someone else, they're just like, what? Like, that's a priority for you and your community? Yeah.
Wow. I appreciate you going a little deeper and adding more details to that, because we talk about it all the time. Perception is reality. There's a lot of people that have never been around that or have never seen that, let alone experience that one color can affect you so negatively versus another one.
Right. Even now with the pandemic and people are wearing like those, you know, those handkerchief type of, and it's like red and blue. I'm like, what are you doing? Like I panic for them. Like,
yeah,
you cannot wear that here. Please take it off, sir. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I 100%. I get that. So I love that you touched on that, because it really creates more of your story of it's understanding, right? Because if you just told someone, oh yeah, you can't wear that, and they're like, what, are you crazy? But then you explain because of this, because of that, it adds more perspective. And that's what life is all about, gaining more perspective, having more understanding for people. So I love just the beginning, and I'm sorry for cutting you off. I'm just like, oh, so good, so good. So
stop me at any time.
So let's continue from there. You grew up in gangland, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gang territory, gang culture. How do you not let that influence you? How do you not fall into that? Or,
to be honest with you, I really feel like, you know, and I talk about God because God to me is a big, influential part of my life. Even though I didn't have God back then in my life. So my mom and my dad were having hard times. Unfortunately, I grew up in an abusive household with an alcoholic father. And even though I didn't see the physical abuse, I could hear the physical abuse. And I feel like if I would have stayed in Inglewood, that might have happened. I'm not sure, but my mom ended up leaving the abusive relationship when I was 12. So one day I came home to my mom not being there. And so at the time, I just found my dad and the other woman at the time in his life packing up my stuff that my mom had left. So at the time, my dad lived in LA, which Inglewood does belong to LA County, but there's also the city of Los Angeles. And so my dad was like driving us every morning from LA to school, trying to just keep that consistency as far as, especially, you're coming home and your mom's not there. And so my dad eventually said, hey, this is too much long of a drive. We need to transfer you to a homeschool here. It was like mid-school year. It must have been like February or March. And my homeschool didn't have enough room. So I ended up being school bused to an affluent area. And I feel because of that happened, it removed me from that culture. Because even prior to that, I was in 6th or 7th grade at the time. So I think it happened for me because I was also being chased home from school. And till this day, I was telling the girls, I have no freaking idea why. Like, if they watch this podcast, like, please send me a message and tell me, what I did to you, because I was being chased home. So I feel like it happened for me in a sense, but that's how I was removed from that for a bit.
Wow. So how old were you when this was going on?
I believe I was 12. Mm-hmm.
And you were 12 years old being chased home from school. Like, what, as a 12-year-old, how do you process that? Like, what's kind of going through your mind when all this is going on? Like, you're just like, I got to get home. Like, what kind of stuff was going through your head?
Oh man, you know what? It was normal. And that's the sad part about it. I remember in 6th grade and going into middle school, and I have no clue. I only heard a rumor that somebody's, boyfriend liked me or something, or I looked at him. I have no clue. And I remember coming out of class and a bunch of girls standing outside and just like waiting to fight me. And of course, as a little girl, you're scared, right? Because you're just like, crap, I'm just here to go to school. I was the girl in band class, carrying my clarinet around. I mean, I wasn't trying to get into any type of situation, but when you're exposed to those situations, you have to toughen up. Whether you like it or not, you have to toughen up. So it was also scary. My house was 2 blocks away from school, and it was just terrifying walking home from school every single day. Having to rush out. If you had the opportunity 5 minutes before to leave, before the bell rang, I would leave. And eventually I did get jumped walking home from school. And for me, it was just terrifying. And I think to this day, that's why I push teaching Brianna Jiu-Jitsu and Krav Maga, because even though she's not in the same community, I'm just super afraid that would happen to her. And for her, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not going to happen to me. You're insane. But I experienced that and being jumped and then walking home crying, bleeding because someone did something to you. That's, for me till this day, that's just unbelievable. But you have to just get the courage to defend yourself, whether you like it or not.
At 12 years old, you have that mindset, and correct me if I'm wrong. You're not even in the hood anymore, right? at
No,
this
at that
point?
time I was in the hood. Yeah.
Oh, you were still okay.
Before.
I thought you had
Yeah.
moved. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it, got it. I was like, wow, that's crazy. That's well,
Yeah.
regardless, right? So what happens after that? So you're 12 years old. This is kind of the situation. How does the story progress from there?
Sure. So since the homeschool at my dad's, going back to that, was completely filled up, they ended up sending me to a school in Brentwood. So I've never even heard of the area. It was right next to Westwood. Very affluent communities. So, just imagine dropping a brown girl from the hood in this very affluent area and trying to fit in, because now the culture is different. And even the education part of it is different. But I've always been a girl who's excelled in school. So I was actually excited about that piece. I feel like, going back to saying that, how do you not get involved in that? If I would have stayed in Inglewood, that's possibly what would have happened. I'm not sure. So I ended up going to Brentwood, and changing my environment in that sense. From there, my mom came back 2 years later. She saved enough money to get her own place. And she said, "Hey, Bianca, do you want to come back to Inglewood and live there?" And so I did decide to go back and live with her, but not go back to the school. And the school, at that time, I was going to high school, so I would end up going to Inglewood High. At the time, Inglewood High had like the reputation of, for example, the father of my kids went to Inglewood High, and he had a knife put to his neck in the basement of that high school. And I was just dreading the fact that I would see the same girls that bullied me, because now it's bullying, right? They bullied me. So I feared that I would see them. And now I'm in another area where, we're focused on our school, we're focused on our academics. Like, why go back to that? So my mom was begging me to go back there to school. She's like, "It's 2 blocks away. It's easier for you." And I ended up going to Palisades High School, which is in the city of Pacific Palisades. It's in between Santa Monica and Malibu. Driving there in traffic, it's probably about an hour drive. So at the time, of course, I didn't have a car. I was 14, 15 making this decision. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to take 3 buses to school every day." And to this day, I just can't believe I made that decision on my own, especially when your own parents are telling you, "Hey, this is much easier for you. You should just walk to school." So I would end up walking, I believe, around 5 in the morning to catch 3 buses to get to school by 8 o'clock every morning.
Yeah, this is the part where I I heard you tell this story the first time, and I'm like, what? Like, so you're a freshman
Yes.
taking 3 buses to get to school,
Yes.
waking up 5 a.m. every morning.
For something to walk out of my house.
True, sorry. Yeah. Oh man. 4.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I stayed one period after. I didn't get out of class on time. So then I would stay an extra period. I was in Mesa math and a math and science program. And so even then I would take 3 buses home and get home like around 6 p.m., 7 p.m., having to do my homework and do it all over again. But being back in Inglewood, those influences definitely started to creep in. So your environment is super important. So I ended up, being a little influenced by it, and hanging around, met a guy, fell in love with him, had puppy love, and ended up becoming a teenage mom. And so I was 15, pregnant, and not knowing what to do. I could have decided to not move forward with the pregnancy. But something inside me was like, "You're strong enough to do this." And so I decided to become a mom. And 2 months before I turned 16, I gave birth to Junior. And I don't regret that decision at all. But my life did change after that. I had to get a job at 16. So I was looking for a job a week before I turned 16 because I needed to take care of this, this baby. My mom was making low income and my dad was in and out of our lives. So I didn't really have that support. So for me, it was like, hey, how am I going to take care of this kid? I knew that it came with responsibilities. So I had to grow up very fast. So not only was I going to school far away, I also, had to get a job. And so I did start driving without a license for a few months. So sorry, cop, don't, hold hold anything against me, right?
I may or may not have been driving without a license.
Right, there you go. That's what I should have said. But yeah, no, I had to do what I needed to do, and at that time, especially because you're a teenager, you only get a permit if you're in good standing at school to work 20 hours. And so I deceived my school into giving me a permit 1 month and then giving me a permit like a few months after. So I was able to get a 40-hour type of situation job. So I worked 20 hours at one job and 20 hours at another job, and had to figure out how I was going to get childcare for Junior and at the same time drive to that school far away. So eventually when I was driving, I would take Junior all the way to downtown LA, which was about a 30 to 45 minute drive in the morning, and then drive myself another 45 minutes to get to school, stay for that extra class, and then drive back to go pick him up, then drive to my house to drop him off, and then go to school. And, the effects of it, I'm still paying for it. Like, my son, there's certain times where, he's upset about his childhood and his situation. And, I hope to this day that, or in the future, he'll forgive me for that, for making the choice of raising him as a teenage parent, because, as I'm growing and learning, unfortunately, he had a mom who was learning at the time and not mature enough to be a good foundation for him. But I know I did the best that I could with the circumstances I was under.
I love that. I love that you acknowledge that and you're just so open about, this is a situation, this is what I have in front of me. We just have to continue to move forward. Right? So let me ask you this, and I didn't get to ask you this the first time. At any point, did you ever play that pity role where like, oh my gosh, poor me, I'm 15, I'm 16, this circumstance, that circumstance. Did you ever have that?
I think at the time, maybe in certain situations, just like in tiny ones, right? At that time, I was learning myself. So right now, to this day, it's like my bullshit meter is like ding, 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 like there's no excuse that you can give me, okay? Because I've gone through it. But, at the time, yeah, of course, I was a teenager too, so I'm not going to lie. I ditched, a couple of times and I got in trouble. They were like, oh, why did you miss school? And I was like, oh, I'm a teenage parent, like, give me a break. But in those circumstances, I would just kind of throw it out there. But as far as like, hey, I'm a teenage parent and I can't do this and I can't do that, I don't feel in my head there was an option. It's like, I have to work. And I feel my mom's situation was the reason for it. Again, my dad wasn't really present in our lives. And I remember hearing my mom like begging my dad for money and begging for his support and begging for him to be there. And I just remember saying, I am never going to be that person to have to beg any man to help me or to support me. So I think with having that mindset, I was just like, you know what? There's no plan B. Like Andy says, there's no plan B. I have to get these 2 jobs because I have to support my family and I have to pay rent and I have to go to school. So there's no, like, what do I have to do in order to get this done? So I never deviated from that.
That's amazing. It was just kind of like embedded in you, right? Like, sure, like you're young, you make, okay, I'm late to class, whatever. But in the grander scheme of things, you took responsibility for the situation and just like, we just got to keep moving forward. One way or another, we just got to figure it out.
We just have to figure it out.
I love that.
From there, luckily I graduated high school. Oh, and before that, you know what? It did get hard. And I do remember telling my mom, you know what? I can't go to work and go to school anymore. I want to drop out. And she cried a little bit about it. But at the end of it, I convinced her to allow me to drop out of school. And I think I also spoke to my dad about it too. And they were a little upset, but they allowed me to drop out. So I even tell that to my kids this day, like, I push you guys so hard because I was able to convince my parents to allow me to drop out of school. And I remember walking in there and telling the person in the office, like, hey, I'm here to drop out. And man, God has been by my side. There was a teacher there that wasn't even my teacher. She just knew me from afar, possibly as like the teenage parent of the school. And she was like, hey, Bianca, what's going on? And she literally like did not allow me to sign myself out of school. She was just like, there is no effing way that you're going to drop out. And I don't think till this day she knows that. She's helped me save my life in that sense, in that moment. And so I'll definitely reach out to her after this. But she stopped me from dropping out. And I'm very, very grateful for that. That I was able to graduate. That was a big milestone in my in my life. I think I was the first to graduate high school. I apologize. My daughter just dropped chips. I was the first one to graduate from high school in my immediate family, which was a huge accomplishment. And luckily, with the help of my counselors, I was accepted to a university. So I was able to move on from there. But again, it was hard. It was a hardship, having to continue to go to school. So I did use that as an excuse. I was accepted to UC schools, the University of California in California. It's a big deal to attend one of those schools, but I stopped myself from going there. I told myself it's going to be too much work and I have a teenage kid. Let me just go the easy route. And I'm not saying that Cal States are an easy route. For anyone that's listening, I went to a Cal State. I'm just saying at that moment, I felt like it was the best choice for me. So I ended up going to a school part-time and at the same time work. So at that time, I was blessed to start working for Bank of America part-time and continue to go to school. Unfortunately, when my accident happened, so for those of you who don't know, I was hit by a drunk driver and became an amputee. And so that's kind of where I stopped my journey as far as going to school. But so then that happened. And I'm sure I'm leaving some stuff out from before that. But yeah.
I feel like if you want to go into more about the accident, because I do feel like there's some incredible things that happen and your whole journey of healing from the accident that I think would be very inspiring for a lot of people if you want to go into that.
At that time, I also had a second child, which is Brianna. So at the time, Brianna was 1.5 years when it happened. So my son's birthday is August 21st. So we had a birthday party that day and I started to get a toothache. And I was one of those girls, like, someone asks like, hey, do you want a Vicodin? And I'm like, no, those are drugs. They're not prescribed to me, right? So I'm like, no way, I'm not going to take it. So the toothache was really, really bad. So we ended the party early and I tried my best to fall asleep, but this toothache was horrible. Around 2 a.m, the father of my kids was there. At that time we were separated, but he was there because of Junior and we didn't want him to drive. It was late. So he offered to drive me. And I just remember telling him, before we got into the freeway, like, hey, you know, don't speed, be careful. But the ride of the car was helping me fall asleep. I woke up to the impact of the accident. And I just remember feeling like something warm. So in that moment, I registered in my brain like something ripped or something broke in my body. Because I just didn't know what it was. I just felt something warm. From my understanding, the car, we were in the 4th lane, so the car spun out of control when the drunk driver hit us. And luckily, by the grace of God, there were no other cars that had hit us in the other lanes. We ended up hitting a guardrail. The guardrail broke, wrapped around my car, sliced off my foot, and almost sliced off my other foot. So it sliced off my left foot. At the time, I didn't know that it happened. Of course, your body goes into shock. I didn't know what happened. I just knew that I was injured. The father of my kids was unconscious. And so I just remember like hitting him hard, like just hitting him to wake up. He woke up. I just told him we've been in an accident. He's like, somebody hit us, somebody hit us. He saw the car ahead and the freeway. He immediately got out of the car. So he didn't even know what had happened to me yet. And I think went towards the drunk driver. I have no idea to this day what happened. But I remember the car was so bad and it was smoking. And I'm thinking to myself, like your flight response is like, hey, I need to get out of this car. It's going to explode. So I remember trying to take myself out of the car. And then I realized, I looked down and my foot was gone. And my other foot was just like pointed in an odd direction. And I knew it was broken. And I just looked down and I'm just like, oh my gosh. But my initial reaction was not to register what had happened to me. It was like, you need to get out of this car. Like it's about to explode. So, as I'm trying to, an off-duty firefighter had driven by at that moment, and it was 3:15, 3:20 in the morning. So, you know, that's also what I can credit to God, that an off-duty firefighter at that moment drove by and saw my accident, ran to me. And I just remember telling him like, hey, call my dad, call my dad. And he was talking me through it and I just shut down. They had to use the jaws of life to get me out of the car. And I remember being in the ambulance, looking up and just thinking, God just gave me like this sense of forgive the drunk driver, forgive what's going on right now. Also, if they don't rush you into the emergency room, then that means that they're not going to attach anything. And luckily, I'm glad to this day that they didn't try to reattach my foot, because I know a lot of other people who have experienced something like that, and they've had their limbs reattached, that they've had issues with that. So, but immediately I'm so lucky and blessed that God gave me the strength to forgive right away. I ended up being in the ICU for about a week, and I spent over a month in the hospital. It's tough because being single, alone, a single mom in the hospital, and of course, someone who, you know, is going through that, you want that support. You want someone there to be there for you. But you're sitting in the hospital room by yourself, laying there by yourself and thinking, what the fuck am I going to do? Right? Like, what am I going to do? And so, I had to learn how to use a wheelchair because I couldn't walk since my other leg was broken. I remember them taking me to this, my first time they allowed me to take a bath by myself, and it was like a huge tub. And I just remember thinking like, wow, I'm never going to be able to feel the feeling of standing in a shower and feeling the shower just fall on top, the water just fall on top of you. Because I had to be careful how to wet my body, you know, or now I need to sit down in the shower. So you start thinking about the little things that you didn't think were such a big deal in your life, and starting to be grateful for those moments that you had that opportunity. So yeah, I ended up leaving the hospital. At that time, again, I was separated from the father of my kids and moving with my mom. My apartment was on the second floor, so I never went back home. And I think that's something that is a little traumatic in itself, because I was never able to go back home. They took all my stuff out of there. I ended up moving with my mom, and it was just my mom and my brother. But I remember just laying there and just sleeping 22 hours out of 24-hour days. I was just completely depressed about what happened. And I didn't have my kids. At the time, the father of my kids and I discussed, like, what's the best thing and for them. And so he said, hey, let me take them. Obviously you can't take care of them right now. So not only did I lose my foot, my leg was broken. I didn't go back home, but now I don't have my kids. So that was very tough, and I'm so sorry, because it's a little emotional when it comes to my kids, right? I'm mama bear. I didn't have my kids there. And I remember my uncle and my aunt coming to the house and saying, like, no, you can't be here, laying here, depressed all the time. My aunt is a stay-at-home mom, so my uncle was like, we're going to have you there, and she's going to be there to help you and support you. And so they ended up taking me to their house, and I'm so grateful to them till this day. I threaten my kids. I tell them, if something ever happens to me, you better take care of them, because I feel like they're angels from God. Because even family, right? Family, you're supposed to be there for thick and thin, but as we grow up, we realize that that's not usually the case with your family. And just the fact that they were able to take me in their home, I'm forever grateful. But I still have that strong mindset. It's like, okay, I'm in this wheelchair. I need to get up. I need to get going. How long is it going to take me? And I remember the surgeon telling me, you know what, Bianca, you're going to be up and you're going to be up in no time, and you're going to be walking around. And I'm like, okay. So luckily my surgeon told me that, because if he would have never set that expectation from the beginning, I possibly would have used that as an excuse not to get up. Just kind of going back, now that I was talking about it, in the hospital, they did give me an option on how to amputate my leg, because my leg was very, very damaged. And I remember, 10 surgeons on one side and 10 surgeons on the other side, one of them saying, you should amputate higher, Bianca, because if you do, you'll be able to wear heels again. And I have another group of surgeons saying, Bianca, you shouldn't amputate higher. You should try to save as much as your leg as possible. But if you make this choice, you won't be able to wear high heels again. So as a woman being told, and I wore high heels every day. I wore high heels pregnant, okay, until my feet couldn't fit into those high heels. I would wear it every single day. So to make that decision, a life-altering decision of not being able to wear high heels, was like devastating in itself. But anyways, going fast forward, luckily my surgeon said, hey, you're going to be up in no time. So that was my goal now. It's like, okay, when do I get my prosthesis? When do I go to therapy? What do I need to do? I need to get back to being fully functioning. And then my surgeon's like, well, let's deal about it psychologically. Are you going to be able to drive and be in a car? And I told them, I have no choice. I'm a single mom. What am I going to do? Drive around in a bus with them wherever I go? No, I have to overcome this fear. So I remember the first few weeks being in a car, being a little terrified, having that PTSD, of someone driving close to me. Until this day, I'll have those moments when someone drives really close to me. I get that little sensation of just like, oh my gosh, like he was really, really close. But, my mindset from there was just, hey, you have to get to this point. How are you going to get there? So I started going to therapy, physical therapy, and strengthening my muscles, even though I didn't have my prosthesis, which was a choice of mine. So again, I feel like God embedded this mindset of just overcoming, because I could have said, well, let me wait until I get my prosthesis. But my therapist, who is also a huge angel, was like, no, Bianca, let's get this started right now. Let's strengthen your muscles right now so you're able to walk and get up in no time. So as a single mom, my right leg healed and I was able to eventually hop on it, but I didn't have my prosthesis yet. So I was taking the kids to their practice to school on crutches on one leg. That was a bit tough. Again, I could have used that as an excuse to not, do things, but I was like, okay, if I put these two crutches together and hold myself against the rail, I can go up and down the stairs. Okay, no problem, And so I was just that crazy lady. Like, I'm sure people were like, dude, like, be disabled, you're right? Like, just slow down. But if I was able to figure out a way to get around, that's what I was going to do. The emotional side of it was a little bit tough. I lost my best friend 6 months after that. She was in the hospital a few months before my accident, and we had already thought that that was going to be the end of it. She had a mixed connective tissue disease, and I didn't know how fatal it was going to be. I don't think she wanted to share that with me. I truly feel to this day, God was like, okay, I know this is going on with you, but I need you to hold off just a few more months because Bianca's going to go through this and I need you to be there for her. And so she was on leave of absence. So during that time, she was driving me to my appointments. She was running errands for me. Even though she was going through what she was going through, she was trying her best to be there for me. So that was hard in itself too, like losing your support. A month before she passed, I remember telling her, hey, I'm going to be able to drive now. I'm just going to do it. Who cares if I don't have my prosthesis? Like, let's get to it. And she said, are you sure, Bianca? You don't need my help. And I said, I'm sure. And that's when God took her away. So to this day, I feel like she was my angel. Then a month after, the father of my kids, I find out that, he was still being unfaithful. We had decided to get back together just because of my situation and see if it worked. Like, hey, you almost lost the love of your life. Hey, this might change the patterns that you had in the past. And then I realized that that wasn't the case. And so it's just like one bad thing after another, like a gray cloud following me all these years. But I never saw it as, okay, you know what? At that point, like, I'm done. I just said, well, I got to keep going. My family cried, like, how are you going to do it on your own? And I said, hey, I have to learn how to live with my disability, whether I like it or not. So whether I'm with a partner or whether I'm not, my girlfriend is a doctor of psychology, and I told her, hey, so when is the part when I'm going to get super depressed and fall apart? She said, maybe it won't happen now, but it might happen later. So let's just worry about it then. So that's pretty much like the beginning of the whole, recovery process. 9 months after, I had my leg using a cane, ready to get back to work. And my surgeon said, this is incredible, Bianca. I never thought that you were going to recover this fast. I thought it was going to be 2 or 3 years to see you up and walking. And then I told them, well, why didn't you tell me that at the hospital? Why didn't you tell me it was going to take 2 or 3 years, right? So to this day, I'm just so grateful that he never set that expectation, because then I probably would have followed that, right? I would have said, okay, well, I'm still recovering. Let me, he said it was going to take 2 years and use that as an excuse. I love the fact that my surgeon was like, you're going to be up in no time, Bianca. And that gave me also the fuel to say, well, hey, I need to get back up.
Oh my goodness. Like you said, this is just the beginning. I was like, oh my gosh, keep going, please. Two things I noticed about everything you've been talking about, Bianca, which I love. You mentioned faith a lot. One thing. Second thing you mentioned a lot was gratitude. Faith and gratitude. Tell me, what is it about having that faith and gratitude that helped push you through these hard times? Because it seemed like it was one after the other, and it just kept on piling up. But yet I don't know how many times I'm gonna have to listen to the episode again, but you said, thank God. You gave him the glory, and gratitude just pours out of you. And how important is it to have faith and gratitude in the middle of all these trying
It's
times?
definitely important. Now, I do want to emphasize that God wasn't introduced into my life until years after that. So my parents were Catholics, right? Because I say that because, we went to church on those important moments, right? Like Christmas, Easter. So we weren't there like devout every single Sunday. But something inside me when I was a little girl, I just knew in my heart and soul that God was a part of my life. It's so weird, and I sound crazy to say this, but I remember being, I think in 5th grade, and being on the playground and just, I don't know if it was the Holy Spirit or something, just telling me, you are my daughter and you are so special, and I want you to know that. And I don't know if it was just to kind of set me up for the following years, that even though I didn't have them in my life, I just always have gone back to that moment, just always. So I wasn't practicing at the time, but it just something like a feeling, a higher power was just telling me, forgive the drunk driver, keep going, do this, do that. So, but I knew that there was a God. I just knew there was one, and just the little things that, the little favors, I would say, that happened along the way. That's why I knew that there was someone there. Yeah. Or an entity, God. Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many times I listen to your story. Every time I hear it, it's just like the first time all over again. And you actually gave us a little bit more of a condensed version today versus the first time when we heard it. There was like so much. I was like, oh yeah, how about this? How about that? And I'm just so excited. And this is a really challenging part. And Renata, please feel free to jump in, because I just don't know where to not stop, but like, where do we do part 1 and part 2? Because I'm like, in my mind, there's like 5 parts to this episode that we can go into. What are you thinking right now, Renata?
Well, I remember, because I have been fortunate enough to hear Bianca speak a few times. There is one part that I would love to dive into a little bit further, if you're open to it.
Sure.
And you were kind of alluding to it a little bit earlier, and that was when the dark cloud finally hit you.
Yes.
I feel like that's such an important part right now in society. Talking about mental health can be a touchy subject, and I think showing your perseverance, showing how you dealt with it, I think could be really pivotal for a lot of people moving forward.
No, yeah, of course. Definitely open to it. So the dark cloud, like, the one that was following me, like, you can only get beaten so much. And I think by that time, it was just, I just had enough. I went back to work. I was managing at Bank of America at the time. So not only was I going through stuff personally, but then helping manage a team, a lot of things personally going on in my life as well. I ended up being in a toxic relationship of some sort. So just a lot of things were going on. And I just remember one day driving to work. I was having problems with the father of my kids. I was having problems in my relationship. My kids, they, I worked so much, so I was really not present in their lives. So I was just getting beat up by their wanting mom to be home more. And just everything around me just became hard. And there was just one point where I said, I'm done. I have enough. And I'm just thinking of ways in my head how to end it. And I remember one day telling my son, I love you. And I just want you to take care of yourself and take care of your sister, promise me. And he knew something was wrong. And that was my first attempt. I drank a bunch of pills in my room. And I woke up the next morning. And I say, I don't think I should have. The amount of pills I took, I don't think I should have woken up by myself. So the fact that I did was a gift in itself. So I wasn't able to take my own life. Okay, I got over it. I'm like, all right, whatever, move on. And then I started thinking about ways to end my life. Like, should I just drive my car into this wall? Should I just drive my car into this freeway post? Should I just end it? My kids would be much happier being in that family dynamic with their dad and their stepmom. And luckily, my kids have an amazing stepmom. So I knew I would be leaving my kids in good hands. And I felt like life was complicated with Bianca in it. And if Bianca would remove herself from being in it, then it would just be easier for everyone. And I don't have to suffer anymore. I don't have to work hard anymore. I don't have to, work endless hours and work to be a good mom at the same time and meet everyone's expectations of being the pillar of my family. Because not only was I going through stuff, but my family was also going through stuff. So I ended up sitting in front of my job and just saying, I don't want to be here anymore. Again. So instead of actually putting pills in my mouth, I went ahead and just drove to the emergency room. And I just said, I just want to stop myself from doing something. I don't think I'm going to do it, but I just don't feel right. So they ended up putting me into the hospital and for a few days, just to kind of evaluate me. Just to make sure that I was okay. And I just remember laying in bed there and just thinking to myself, like, what have I done? Right. Being here in this situation. I told my family to call my job to tell them that I was in the hospital. And I was there for a few days. And I remember the psychologist that was there at the time, he told me, Bianca, if you don't change your negative mindset, you are never going to get better. And that was the first time I was told that I had a negative mindset. So for me, I couldn't accept that. Like, what do you mean that I have a negative mindset? He's like, if you don't change it or turn it around, you're not going to get better. I got out of the hospital and I came home to a job abandonment letter. And for me, it was a stab in the heart because I've worked long hours, sweat and tears for the company. And for you to send me a letter saying, fuck you, Bianca, right? That's what I read. I was really upset. And I remember I was in my suit, ready to go to work. And I remember God telling me, you need to quit your job. And I'm like, what? I'm a single mom, 2 kids, and disabled. Like, there's no fucking way. There's just no way. And I always say, like, I picture like the meme where, Jesus is holding the big bear behind him and the little girl has the small bear. And he's like, I need you to let go of this bear because I have something bigger than you. I feel like at that moment, that's what he was trying to tell me, like, let it go. So again, single mom, disabled, tired from the disability, thinking to myself, why do you want me to quit my job? then I call my friend, and as I'm driving there, I'm telling him like, hey, so I think I'm going to quit my job. And he's like, what? Like trying to stop me. And for those of you that have seen Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where when he finds like his girlfriend and his friends on the phone, like, no, don't do it. Like that was my friend. Like, stop what you're doing. Like, stop. Like, where are you? You know, share your location. Like, I need to go get you. And I remember walking in, and I walked in with such confidence, and I'm like, I just want to let you guys know I'm quitting. Here are my keys. And I'm like writing it, like, you know, I'm done. And my team is like, what? Because it's like their captain, they said it, this is how they said it. It felt like our captain jumped ship. And I've never, ever, ever given up on anything. So that was like the first time that I ever gave up on something. So I left it. And I think that's where I got closer to God. I felt like God was like, I need you to break away from the working 9-10 hour days, then coming home and being a mom, and then having to deal with the, I wouldn't say bullshit, but the stuff that was going on in my family as well. My family dynamic is not that great too. So, you know, they've been through their own struggles, but I was the one that was holding them up at the same time. So it was just so much going on. I had felt like my brain, that let's say these are the wires. I felt like my brain just, 2 wires just went ding. And you're just like, okay, so what do I do? How do I function? What do I need to do? I left my job. So for 6 months, and it's not like I got unemployment because I didn't get fired. So, you know, luckily I was blessed enough to have some savings in my account to help me along the way. So that's where also I can give that credit to him, because he set me up for that moment to break away from that. So when I broke away from it, 6 months I spent depressed at home. And God blessed me with Timothy, and which is my dog. Timothy's my dog. God blessed me with him. You know, I did go through the whole newborn peeing on stuff, you know, tearing up rugs for a while. So, and the person who blessed me with him will probably put on the comments like she tried to get rid of him 100 times, and I did. Okay, so I'm just gonna be transparent there. All right, but with that, I was doing the bare minimum. I was only making sure they were fed, taking them to work, and then, school, and then coming home and being depressed, and then picking them up, and then coming home and being depressed. But with the dog, I had to take him out to walk him. And so as I'm doing that, I'm starting to walk him, and I'm starting to listen to stuff. My friend who wanted to stop me from quitting my job, he had introduced me to Andy Frisella a few months before. So I started kind of listening to him here and there when I was driving to work. And I remember listening to him and just thinking, hearing someone who curses, and I apologize, guys, I know I was cursing a little bit. I remember him cursing, and I cursed like a sailor. So I remember this millionaire cursing and just being like such a badass. And I'm like, oh my God, I can be that badass too. And people accept that. That's amazing, right? And then he shared his story about being on antidepressants and anxiety medication, and feeling like, people around him thought he was crazy because he was working so hard and doing all these things. And so I'm thinking, wait, that's me too. Oh my gosh, people work hard like I do. Because my family would tell me all the time, you work so hard, your kids are not going to love you. You're not a good mom. Doesn't the bank close at 6 o'clock? Doesn't, just so much negativity from my family that I felt insane. I felt insane, but hearing someone talk about that was refreshing. So I started listening to Andy, and then I started listening to sermons as I'm walking Timothy. And now I hear Andy's podcast with Ed Milet. And now I like Ed Milet, right? It's just, And I'm just thinking, now that I look back at it, I felt like God just needed me to quit my job to spend those 6 months listening to them, listening to sermons, listening to Andy, listening to Ed. And that became like what my daily routine all of a sudden became. Like, my kids hate me to this day because radio is not radio anymore. Radio is Ed in the background or Andy in the background, right? Or those of you that are in RTA Syndicate, we're part of the RTA Syndicate. So listening to those calls as well. But I just remember listening to them. And so from there, I remember saying, okay, I'm getting ready back to work, go back to work. And then Chase called me and said, hey, we heard you're a manager without a home. So it's like God was like, don't worry, I got you. I need you to take this time for yourself. And when I said I was ready to go back to work, he blessed me with a job. So I didn't even have to look for it. And I tanked that interview. I know I shared that with you guys before. And I remember driving away thinking, like, there's no way they're going to hire me. And I wouldn't have hired me. And I'm so hard. But he blessed me with the job anyway. So that's why I give him the credit, because I know there's certain things that have happened in my life that wouldn't have happened just by myself. So yeah, that's a snippet of the cloud. Yeah.
I love that story because you're like, I don't even know how I'm going to get this. I'm not really sure how this is going to work out. Like, what the? I got it. All right. Right on.
Yeah. So, I mean, just with that, I ended up being hired in an affluent neighborhood. And so, that for me was great because I was able to see the beach every day, driving to work and just be in that environment. And then God came knocking again and said, so I want you to transfer to Inglewood. And I'm like, what? Yeah. I'm like, what? So I kind of encountered some adversity in that market. I remember a few managers sitting me down and telling me, are you sure that this is the right job for you? Are you sure that you want to be a manager or a leader? And I knew in my heart that I was a great leader, and I knew that I was a great manager. And for people to be negative, and I don't know to this day if it was, the color of my skin or where I was from or how I speak or what I'm about. I don't know. I was going through some stuff emotionally at the time as well. And I was trying my best not to allow that to filter through into my job. So I actually was abused that Christmas, and physically punched in the face one time and the only time. And I bring God in it too, because that Friday, the person that was mentoring me said, hey, don't you have a few vacation days? Do you want to take them and come back on Thursday? And that year, Christmas was on a Sunday, and the person pretty much beat me up really bad. And Thursday morning, I was able to put a little bit of foundation on and walk in with my head up back to work. So, I don't know if that actually bled through to, but I tried my best not to show that at work. But anyways, God used those people's, perception of me or negativity for a reason. So I knew at the time that I needed to get out of that market, and someone presented the opportunity of going to Inglewood. So when the opportunity was presented, I was ready to fight and stay there to the end and just say, you know what, if you don't like me, then just fire me. But God was like, nope, I need you to go to Inglewood. And so I'm like, are you sure, God? Like, really? Okay, fine. So I ended up accepting the position there. And honestly, it was the best decision that I could have ever made. I'm not going to lie. There were many times where I was about to go to jail. And I told my boss, like, dude, I feel like I'm back in middle school. I feel like people are just coming up to me. There were customers that would come up and say, "Where's that fucking bitch at?" Which is me, the manager. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm the bitch. Like, what did you need help with?" Like that. And I think it was more so for God to say, I want you just to kind of see like where you're coming from and your mindset. And there was a reasoning behind it. I do feel also that he wanted me to be a part of some people's lives that were there, that came through there. So again, God, use me as you want to, whether it's you want to put me in an affluent area, you want to put me, in a low income area, whatever you want to do, use me. And there were plenty of opportunities where I was able to speak to clients and to even my own staff that needed me at the moment. And so I'm glad I was there. But being there, I was able to meet mentors for my son, and also given a lot of opportunity and exposure to executives within the company. So I was given an opportunity to speak in front of maybe 50 to 75 people about financial literacy, and maybe 30 of those people were executives from different lines of business. And I would have never had that opportunity to, kind of be up there and speak. And, God in those sermons had told me like, "Hey, I just need you to show up. Like, you don't have the experience, but I just need you to show up." So I remember practicing before speaking, tanking the practices that we were doing. And I remember the person overseeing it thinking like, "Wow, Bianca's going to fall apart on stage." And when I had the mic and it turned on and it was my turn to speak, it was like God just took over and just spoke for me. So I believe now when God says, "I'm going to open doors for you," and you might feel inadequate or you might feel like you don't belong, but I just need you to show up. I just need you to give me enough faith to show up. I also had a small dream of becoming or being part of a business resource group. And that was my dream since Bank of America. And I remember we didn't have a presence in California, the business resource group that I was, which is called Accessibility. So pretty much the business resource group was tailored for employees who had physical and learning disabilities, and how we can enhance their experience in a work environment. And so we didn't have a presence in California. And I remember my manager saying like, "Wow, wouldn't it be great that you can create a subchapter for that group?" And so how can I create a subchapter when we don't even have a whole state established? So the opportunity came where a position, they started establishing the California presence, and there was a leadership position available. And I told myself like, "Wow, I would just love to apply for it, but who am I to apply for this position for California?" And I remember one of my friends in Arate saying, "Well, what's the worst that can happen? They're going to tell you no, right?" And I'm thinking, I'm just a branch manager. Like, why would they choose me? There's like executives on here. There's so many qualified people. Like, who am I? I applied for it and I got it. And that to me was just like mind blowing in itself, because now I was in influence to help establish subchapters. It wasn't me creating a subchapter for Southern California. And so me being able to leave the beach scene of being in that market, to going to Inglewood, to finding the mentors that my son needed for his success, to being able to be given the opportunity to be in rooms with people that can see me, and then also have the opportunity to become a California business resource group leader. Like, who the fuck am I? Why? Right? Like, who are you? So that to me, just in itself, it's just crazy insane. Again, it's with the influence of having, God, Andy, and Ed, and listening to them, and feeding myself with that content.
My mind's like so many different areas, so many different questions, so many different comments, because this past hour, 10 minutes, you've just taken us on a ride, an emotional ride. The way you tell your story, like I'm glad that the camera's like on you most of the time, because if it was on me, like I'm like picturing it happening in my head like a movie. So this portion of the show is going to be obviously on the podcast. I think what I would love to bring up to you, and if you're open to it, I would love to have the second portion where we have a little bit more in-depth Q&A.
Sure.
Live.
I feel good.
How do you feel about that?
Call my doctor for some extra Xanax to be able to do it live. Kidding, guys. I'm kidding.
Right? No, I just love your rawness, your authenticity, and your openness to share your story. Like you're real. You know, one of the things I admire about you is how, and some people may feel differently about it, but how you can just be real and be like, F this, F that, and then be like, no,
I know.
Right.
The other day, I was, what did I say in my prayer? I wish Brianna was around. Like, I was praying to God for healing for, people close to me. And then I remember, what did I say, Brianna? Oh, I said, please, God, forgive me. Also, like, please keep me from beating, and I just started, like, saying curse words. And my daughter was like, what? So for those of you, I know that God doesn't want me to curse. So, I know that I don't need a lecture or a DM about it, because I've had, some calls, but I feel like God, eventually I'll stop cursing, but I feel like God loves me how I am. And
right.
yeah.
He knows your frame, right? Before all of these things that happened to us, he knew who you were becoming, who you are right now. In all of that, the good, the bad, everything in between, he knew, and he knows who we are, what we've been through. So I'm not saying like trying to make an excuse or anything, but I just love that's authenticity. I would much rather have you speak that way, because that's what's in your heart, versus like, oh, this is perfect, life is really good. Like it's not. This is what the show is all about, right? Like faith, family, fitness, and freedom, and then that ability to just look at your circumstances and be like, you know what, fuck it, just fuck it, and just keep moving forward anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you've had to learn. I don't know who was on Ed's podcast lately. I think it was the love, sex, drugs, and alcohol episode. I'm not sure it was, but he's like, you learn how to fall, and you just learn how to pick yourself up. You just fall, pick yourself up, fall, pick up, And at the beginning, it wasn't like that. At the beginning, I would somewhat dwell in it for a little bit and be in my emotions and be depressed. And now it's just like, okay, well, shit, I fell, I scraped my knee. Okay, where's the alcohol? Where's the Band-Aid? Let's get back to it. And I have to, now that you mentioned the fitness part of your podcast, I also am grateful for being in martial arts as well. Because you learn that. You learn getting hit. You learn, being attacked, and then, feeling bad about it then and there. But it's like you just have to keep moving on and keep moving forward.
That's so good. That's so good. Now, for the people that are listening or watching and hearing your story for the first time, how can they connect with you and follow more of your story?
You can follow me on social media. I'm on Bianca_Castle. And that's pretty much the social media I have open right now. I would say I'm pretty humble when it comes to speaking about myself. That's one of the opportunities that I have, right? Like I can't I just, like, as I'm talking about myself right now, I'm just, like, I can't.
Yeah.
If you ever have any questions, you can definitely send me a DM. Anytime, I'm there. I've had a few amputees reach out to me. I've had a few people that had dark times in their lives reach out to me, and so I'm definitely an ear. I'm a big advocate of mental health. I try to give my 2 cents wherever I can, because I've been there. I'm more comfortable now sharing my experience, because if we don't talk about it, how are we going to learn from it? How are we going to learn what to do? What are the signs? How to be there for someone? How to support someone? Even when I came out of the hospital, I felt, how do I say? I still felt alienated by the people around me, and that's something that's key. You need family, and you need that support around you when you're feeling that way.
So I wanted to ask you this last question, because you've spoken about your life. You've shared with us so many hardships and all the ways you've been able to overcome them. So I'm curious if anyone's listening or watching and they're facing a hard time right now, what would be that one piece of advice, that one piece of guidance that you would like to share with them?
I know that it sounds like everything's not going to be okay, but everything is going to be okay. There is a solution to everything. One of our friends in the RT syndicate, and I'm sorry and I apologize ahead of time, but if I don't pronounce his name correctly, but Joe Bielski shared a post recently that he had not really cared. His goal was just for his kids to get to 18, and then who cares about his life? And I've always lived that way too, where it's like, God, just allow me to walk and be able to walk until I'm 18, till my kids are 18, until they're self-sufficient, and then, do whatever you want. But I always tell my kids, everything has a solution. Everything has a solution. Everything. Even though at that moment it might seem like there's no solution to your problem, there is, and maybe you might not know the solution. Maybe your friends might not. Maybe your family might not. But I promise you there's a solution out there. And maybe you just have to take a step back and quiet your mind if you believe in God, and just pray to Him for a solution, or reach out to someone, maybe not even close to you for that solution, but there's always a solution to something. And I know it's easier said than done, but there just is. And I say that because for those who want to take their life, if they do, God loves you. And there's just, like, you are here for a reason. Like you said, He made you before, you came, he put you in your mother's womb for a reason. And we're all different. I mean, even the lines on our hands are different for a reason. So even though you might not see it now, you're special. And 10 years ago, I would have never felt the way I feel now. And now that I look back at my life, it's just insane. So your life can be different in 10 years. Don't let your existing circumstances affect your life right now, because you never know. That circumstance might be a learning, something for you to learn from that moment, whatever it is, and as heartbreaking as it is. I remember falling in love with someone, and then God telling me it's not your time, and I'm like, damn, that's fucked up, God. Like, I was so close, since I was single, but it was just a moment in time that I needed to learn something and then move on. It's tough, right? So you're not always going to get what you want. Like, you're not always going to get the candy that you want, as a little kid. It's just, It might just be a learning at this time. So take a step back, recognize your feelings, and maybe talk to someone, even professionally. In my culture, therapy, there was no such thing as depression, no such thing as anxiety. It's like what you need to do, you just need to get over it. And I'm a strong believer in having a therapist or having someone to help you, someone to talk with about it. There's no shame in that.
Wow. Bianca, I just want to say thank you so much for just giving us your time, sharing your knowledge and experience and your stories with us, and being just so vulnerable. Because I don't know who's listening or watching this right now, but I hope you heard something today that you can take away to move in the right direction. And I just want to say I appreciate you so much, Bianca. Thank you, thank you, thank you for just giving us your time today. I'm very excited to get that interview with you so we can dive deep into so many great things that you've been talking about, and I'm excited to make that happen. So thank you so much, Bianca.
Thank you. Thank you too. I appreciate it.